let's look at the continuing tensions between Australia and China and catch up with Michael Shoebridge, who heads up the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Thanks for joining us again, Michael. I wanted to get you back on to get the latest on this development. We had the Trade Minister, Damien, on the program last night. He said he's reached out to his Chinese counterpart and has not heard back. And we heard from former Trade Minister Andrew Robb today, and he said his view is that patience will be needed. Any mending of diplomatic relations between Australia and China will be a long, long way off.
Yeah, I think he's right, Chris, but patience needs to be complemented by a sense of self-respect. Beijing has absolute contempt for weakness, and I think that's something that the Prime Minister understands very well. So it's a long game, and part of it is about showing the Chinese we have alternative markets for a whole lot of our quality products. That's starting to happen.
Yeah, we're starting to look especially to India, of course. Indonesia is another country that has massive potential for us, obviously a neighbour of ours, and we haven't really even begun to tap into the trade opportunities there, have we?
No, we haven't, and we've got a long, proud history of failing as two countries to build a good economic relationship. You know, you've got to think about things like, how do we help Indonesia have a good cold chain storage system for foods, and think about medicines, getting vaccines that need refrigeration into the place. There's money to be made from companies that help Indonesia store things in cold conditions.
Now, when it comes to standing up to China, we expect solidarity from Western liberal democracies. It's no good if Australia is left having these arguments on its own, and especially we need solidarity from our allies, our economic partners and our allies. So that's why it was so distressing last week to see New Zealand playing a game where they were the good guys to China and they were suggesting that Australia should actually back off a bit. Here's the New Zealand Trade Minister last week. Extraordinary stuff from Damien O'Connor. Have a look.
Look, I can't speak for Australia in the way it runs its diplomatic relationships, but clearly, if they were to, follow us and show respect, I guess a little more diplomacy from time to time and be cautious with wording, then they too hopefully could be in a similar situation.
I mean, that's extraordinary, isn't it, Michael? That's the message direct from Beijing.
Well, they are Beijing's foreign ministry talking points, so it's pretty depressing to hear them in the mouth of a New Zealand minister. I think the other important thing is he talks about careful choice of words. Well, New Zealand not joining the other Five Eyes, the UK, Canada, the US and Australia, in condemning Chinese arrests of pro-democracy people, 55 of them in Hong Kong, that's not about word choice and nuance. That's about New Zealand not standing up for values that they hold dear. That's bad news. And as you say, not having cohesion in that Five Eyes partnership, the only country that helps is China and the Chinese state. Doesn't help New Zealand. I think it's an immature position from a trade minister, but their foreign ministers made similar noises about New Zealand's a small country and can only talk up when others have already.
Well, Dan Tian is meeting with Damien O'Connor later this week, presumably behind closed doors. He would try and urge New Zealand to put some steel into its spine. But does Scott Morrison need to intercede here with Jacinda Ardern and just point out some of the grim realities here?
Well, I think he could. He's already been quite mature. I think he said New Zealand needs to work with Australia on this. And I think the subtext was, and not against Australia on this. I think Jacinda Ardern understands this well, but a Prime Minister to Prime Minister connection is a good thing for Australian and New Zealand leaders to have. New Zealand also has to think about how this looks in the South Pacific. What things is New Zealand willing to trade away for cash from Beijing? And how does that work in the South Pacific for them?
Yeah, it's a concerning situation. I would have thought Beijing would be very happy to see the way they've cleaved away New Zealand and Victoria, really, from Australia's pretty strong and principled foreign policy stand, and we need to rectify that. Another intriguing revelation in the last 24 hours relates to Chinese influence in our universities. And the new Chancellor of Adelaide University, he comes from the University of Queensland, and he said publicly that UQ should never have accepted funds from China for a Confucius Institute. That's not surprising criticism, but it's a surprising admission, isn't it, coming from someone inside the university system?
This is a bit like a reformed smoker talking. So, I'm pleased that he's saying this now, but in his time at UQ, he acted differently. So maybe it's a sign that some of our university leadership are starting to understand that what they do matters to our country's security and our prosperity, and their relationship they've had with Chinese institutions, the Chinese military, as well as Chinese research counterparts connected to the security apparatus of China, that needs to change. So I congratulate him on these recent views, and I hope they stick with him for some time.
Indeed. Thanks so much for joining us again, Michael.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Michael Shoebridge there from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute.